There's chairs right here. This row.
Looks like there are people's notebooks.
Oh, there's people's notebooks.
Yeah.
Okay, so just try the extremities. Let me see. Let me move one row in and maybe accommodate you ladies here into this row, if there are people who are seated in those spots. All right. Thank you to everybody who has cooperated so kindly. I'm not going to make my way all the way to the front past that tech moment, because we have people who are live streaming our conference and watching us today from the comfort of their offices and homes, and quite possibly their holiday destinations, because South Africa, it's Friday today in South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to part 2 of our session today as day 1. As I indicated, you won't only hear from me, but there are amazing women who run the world, and I've got another panel of them behind me, who will continue the discussion around gender transformation in the aviation space. The next panel will be run by Alinda and Yolande, and they are going to be talking about and beginning to write a different script and narrative for gender participation and inclusivity in the aviation industry. Alinda, as you can see on the screens to my left and to my right, is the founder as well as the executive chair of Free to Grow South Africa, and Yolande, who is accompanying her this afternoon, is a senior facilitator with the same group. And they will guide us through what is required. Again, some reminders for you. If you are on social media, our hashtag is still the same as it was. The time is now. To those of you who are on the app, thank you, ladies, for some of the connections that you're already making. I'm already enjoying it. Please make sure you use it to follow the program, but also to connect with some of the new friends and associates and potential business partners and clients you may meet as part of our program today. Please don't forget about the cocktail later on today, and I hope to see some of you in your finery tomorrow still at the gala dinner, but more about that a little bit later tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you very much for coming back, and not to have chosen the very lovely option of walking around in the waterfront while you are here in Cape Town. I hope this is going to be worth your while the next 2 hours. Yolande and I must be one of only a handful of people here on the stage that are not at all related to the aviation industry. I fly a lot, but that's about as close as possible that I'm really to this industry. What do we do and why are we here, and what are we trying to achieve this afternoon? We are part of Free to Grow, and our purpose is to help organizations, to partner with organizations to shape and sustain a culture of inclusion, engagement, and collaboration, because those 3 go together. And what we will be sharing with you today is not only reflective of cutting-edge international research on unconscious bias and inclusion, but it also comes from a huge amount of experience that we've gained across the world in the last 24 years in 33 countries, with a large amount of organizations, amongst others, working with organizations in your industry. But what we are trying to do this afternoon is this is the one session where we are trying to give you a voice and complement the voices of the ladies here around us on the panel with the voices and the wisdom in this room. So it's going to be different from any other session, and that's why I'm so grateful that our MC was able to get all of you in the front. And we're really going to do our best to try to make it engaging and exciting and participative for you as well. one of the tools we are going to use is Mentimeter. So normally people stand up here and say, put away your cells, put away your mobile, switch them off. Well, I'm going to ask you, take out your mobile, switch it on, and go to www.menti.com. This is a wonderful audience response system which will give each of you the opportunity of bringing your voice onto the screen there in front of us. So throughout the session, we will ask questions. You will type in your response, and the trends will become visible on the screen. So have you all gone there? Then please use that code 469065. When you are able to connect, just put up your hand to show me that you are actually online. Some of you may struggle. We need more people connected, please. Great. There's wonderful. Some here, please, on this side. Wonderful. Okay. Let's just take a quick try to see if Mentimeter actually works. So let's go to our first slide, the Mentimeter. Some of you may be visiting Cape Town for the first time. Which of these things are on your must-do list? Well, wine tasting is winning. Give some more balance, please. Wine tasting still in the running front. Wine tasting, wine tasting, wine tasting. Wine tasting is even beating Robben Island at this stage. We need some more votes, please. Okay. So should many of you not return tomorrow morning, we know where you will be due. Okay, so this is really a very nice tool just to bring your voices into the conversation, and the panel will then comment on what we are actually seeing here in the room. So let's move on. So now we are all tuned in terms of technology. Let's see if we can tune into the topic. We talked a lot this morning about intentional. Things need to be intentional. And when you are a presenter, then every image should also be intentional. Otherwise, it's just eye candy. So we chose this image for our topic. Unconscious bias at work. Moving from unconscious bias to conscious inclusion. Now I want to ask you, and that's why our MC said, please sit next to somebody. Please turn to the person next to you, and in 1 minute, discuss with that person why you believe we have chosen that image. What does it tell us about diversity? What does it tell us about inclusion? 1 minute, and I want to ask you to have your eyes. You've got 2 eyes for a reason. The one eye will be on your partner. The other eye will be on me. So when I felt after a minute, I'm going to wave. The moment your one eye on me see the wave, you complete your sentence and you please become quiet. Can we agree on that? Okay, go for it. Why that image? What are the links? Thank you. Some of you seem to only have one eye, and that links very closely to bias. We'll get to that just now. Okay, so just remember, whenever we have a pair share, We will wave from the front when you have to conclude, and whenever you see us waving, just wave with us, and then the other people who may be missing that will also get the message. Thank you. Why that image? When I look at that, I see beauty. I see diversity. I see difference. But I also see inclusion. Those flowers are being looked at, they are being valued, and they are included into something where they become valuable. Is that more or less what you had in mind about that inclusion? And one can have another conversation about what is it that actually pull people together. What is that tie? But that's for another day. In nature, diversity is valued. In nature, people come from far to look at diversity, to marvel at it. They stand in awe in front of diversity. And they can't get close enough to look at the beauty of diversity. But in people, diversity, unfortunately, does not draw us closer. It tends to set us apart. And we can be different in so many ways. At our core, and we often tend to look at gender and age and all these things, but at our core we are different in terms of who we are, our personality, and our personal values. And each of us, the 450 here, each of us are totally unique and totally different regarding that. And then the next layer of diversity is our internal dimensions. Those are the things that we've been born with. Those are the things that make us who we are as individuals. And gender is one of them. I am a woman. I am 62 years old. I am this and this and this. That is who I am. I cannot change, and I don't want to change, not for anybody or for anything. This is me. The next layer of diversity is about our external dimension. That's not about what we were born with, but those are the things that we have chosen or the roads that we have walked. And they bring us in different destinations. And then we have the next layer, and that's the organizational dimension, where we find ourselves or where we place ourselves. In terms of all of these, we can be either the same or different from other people. From about 15 years ago, there was a strong focus on diversity. What makes us different? There was a strong focus on understanding all these different pieces that make up who we are and helping other people understand who we are. But one of the most beautiful quotes I've ever heard on this topic, Werner Meyer said, "Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance." Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. And because that is so true, and so often we have women who are invited to the party but not being asked to dance, because of that, we need a shift in focus. Where the focus was very much on diversity, we now need to shift our focus to inclusion. Inviting, encouraging, enabling, empowering people to dance, the dance that is in them, and be the best and do the best work that they can in organizations. I want to ask you, can you think of a situation in your work where you, as a woman, were invited to the party, but you were never asked to dance? And if you are a man, can you think of a situation where you invited a woman to the party in your workplace, but you never allowed or encouraged or brought her in to dance? And I'm going to ask you to turn to the person on your right and just have a 2-minute conversation about trying to find a time in your work where you saw this play out. Turn to the person on your right. More or less make it work, please. Or somebody at your back or somebody in front of you. Choose whoever you want to. Long enough? Wonderful, thank you. So from the level of noise, it sounded as if it was not that difficult to find examples in your own workplace where this happens. Am I right? It happens all the time. Let me ask Refilwe from our panel to give us an example from her environment where she, either that happened to her or you observed it happening. Okay. Please, Refilwe.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon. My example comes from a bit of my technical background. I worked as a helicopter pilot a few years ago. And I was the only female at the unit for a while, for about 7 years. They would have operations where they would have a sort of a side discussion, who's going to be doing the operation. So I was never quite included in those discussions. And afterwards, then they'll come to me and tell me, you're not going to be able to do that operation because it's in the bush, you're not quite fit to do that. So I was never actually involved in the decision making and what were the obstacles or the barriers that would have prevented me from doing that particular operations. They assumed that I wouldn't be able to do it. So I think this is, for me, it's a good example that, yes, I was allowed to be in the industry, I was allowed to fly, but yet I was allowed to only do selected operations, and I wasn't really quite part of the decision making as well as to why I wasn't allowed to do other operations.
Okay, that's a lovely example. Thanks for that. How did that make you feel? Just give me 3 words. How did that make you feel?
You feel left out, obviously not being part of the team, and people making decisions about challenges that impact on you. So, yeah.
Quite strong words, being made left out, made feel that you were left out, that you were not important. So when we do not include people, it has a huge impact on them emotionally and also on their engagement and on their motivation and on their lives, because we can't divide ourselves into compartments. And now people can say, but that's not really important, you know, how people are feeling, etc., you know, they must get over themselves. But let's look at it from a business perspective. Here we see dry wood. High up in the mountain there was a storm, and wood was swept down the river, trees, and now it's lying there on the beach, dry wood. That's all some people see. But Heather Jans, a woman from New England, does not look at that as just dry wood. She sees potential. And she starts to pick it up, gather it, and she molds it, and she shapes it. And she turns it into something of beauty. When women enter our workforce, they bring with them immense potential. In some organizations, they are being molded and they're being shaped. And they can become what they can. They can bring their best to the work. In other organizations, they do not get those opportunities. And people look at them and say, just dry wood. It's not in the women. It's in the environment that we create that will unleash what people have or keep that hidden. And it's a beautiful picture to look at that, but it makes business sense. There's been overwhelming research stating that inclusive culture is more productive. It gives the organization far more benefits than one that's not inclusive. Where organizations with inclusive culture are 2 times more likely to meet or exceed financially. Bottom line. They're 3 times more likely to be high performing. They're 6 times more likely to be innovative and agile. And who do not need that in today's environment? And they're 8 times more likely to achieve better business outcomes. So if it makes business sense, why don't we do it? Why isn't it part of who we are as organizations? And how far are we from a space where women can fully contribute what they have and who they are in our organizations? And here we go back to the next Mentimeter. In your organization, in your specific country, to what extent are women empowered to develop their full potential? This is, of course, subjective, but just vote on that. Not at all or fully, and choose the continent that you are actually living in, that part of your organization, that country in which continent. So please all vote there, and let's see how fully are women in your organizations empowered to develop their potential, to be their best, to do their best work. We need quite a lot more people. 75 people have voted. Goes up quickly. Africa seems to be ahead in this one. We're not good at soccer, but we're good at other things. Okay, we do not need to wait for everybody. I think we get a trend. Is there somebody of the panel who would like to share with us what is the picture that you are seeing? What does it tell you?
So, afternoon, everybody. My first observation, and I was sharing it with Yolande to say, wow, Africa, what is probably perceived to be the most patriarchal of the continents, is actually quite progressive. So for me, that says quite a lot. So it's either a combination of a number of things. Because what Yolande was saying, we are a lot more aware of it, a lot more deliberate about it. And similarly, then we then start to push the boundaries. But I also think that there's a number of things clearly that is being done within the African context because we are so aware of it. That much more has then been elevated in terms of what we then put into action. So that's very, very pleasant surprise.
Pleasant surprise to see how well Africa is doing, but everything is relative. When you look at that, we're not even halfway there overall. 2, 3. We haven't even started. We're so far from where we should be in terms of inclusion. And that's not really a wonder, because inclusion is actually a journey. It's not something you start on day 1 and then day 2 you have arrived and you're there. It's a journey. And for many organizations, I say it's not a journey, it's really an uphill battle. You just think you've made it, and then somebody says something, you think, goodness, how on earth in today's age could you still say that on a public platform? So what we need to do in organizations is we have to realize it's a journey, and we have to make it a total focus to creating a culture, a company culture that is inclusive. It will not happen by chance. Otherwise, we would not have seen these figures that we have at this day and age still. It doesn't happen by chance. It doesn't happen by default. We need to consciously and intentionally create a culture of inclusion. So it's not about 1 or 2 leaders or this or that department. Inclusion should be the way we do things around here in this organization, and should not be negotiable. Otherwise, we're never going to get moved there. We're never going to make progress. What are the different facets of inclusive culture? The first one is fairness and respect. That's a basic thing. If you don't have that, you haven't even opened the door to inclusion. Fairness and respect. And you can see we've used the symbol of the scale there. Because women need to know I am equally valuable, I am equally valued, I'm treated fairly. If that is not there, nothing else will really be able to take place. And we easily say those words, but how often in our policies and our behaviors we do not show that fairness and respect. Just like to show a video illustrating this principle of fairness and respect.
Jeg heter Selma. Og jeg heter Martin. Jeg heter Ask. Jeg heter Victoria. Jeg heter Lars. Og jeg heter Felicia.
Nå har jeg en liten jobb til dere. Jeg tenkte at dere skulle putte de blå ballene i den ene vasen, og de rosa i den andre.
Okay. Skal vi ta rosa i den og blå i den da? Nei. Omvendt. Blå i denne.
Men nå skal dere få belønningen deres.
Oi. Hva er dette for noe? Hva er dette for noe?
Ok, og nå kan dere åpne øynene.
Oi! Hva? Jeg fikk litt mer.
Molly, grunnen til at du har fått mindre enn Thomas, det er faktisk fordi du er jente.
Det er kjemperart. Det er ikke bra. Det er skikkelig urettferdig.
Hva tenker du, Felicia?
Jeg jobbet helt litt, og så får vi ikke det samme. Vi var like flinke, og vi burde få like mye.
Hvorfor det?
Fordi ellers så blir det urettferdig. Det er liksom ikke forskjell på jente og gutt, da. Jeg tenker at det er feil.
Hvorfor er det feil?
Jenter er ikke mindre verdt enn gutter. Det har ikke noe å si hvis man er gutt eller jente. Sånn, jeg tror det er litt mye. Nei. Nå har vi litt mye. Nå har vi litt mye.
Children know instinctively when something is unfair. And you never lose that ability. We also know that. And it hurts when you are being treated unfairly. So that's the foundation. The first one. Let's move to the second one. Feeling valued for who you are and knowing that you are belonging. It means that you are feeling valued for being a woman, for being the way you are, for coming with whatever makes you who you are. And that is okay. You do not have to take on another persona when you sit around the boardroom table. You do not have to say, now I have to think like a man on this one. You bring who you are, and that is valuable and valued. And you are seen as a valuable team member because of what you bring. The third part. Women need to feel safe and need to feel they are safe enough to be open and talk about things that are not working for them in the environment, to talk about bias that they experience, to talk about situations that they see as unfair and disrespectful, instead of having to keep quiet. Those little children spoke up and say, but that's weird. But sometimes when we're adults, we remain quiet. We have to be polite. We don't say what we think and feel. Or we keep quiet because we fear repercussions. You can't have an inclusive environment if that safetiness and openness is not there. And the fourth part, women should be in a place where they have the opportunity to shine according to their potential, where they have the opportunity to grow, where they have the opportunity to learn. Very basic stuff. But this is what is required in your organization. If you want to create a culture where women will feel that they belong, that they're treated fairly, that they are respected and valued, and that they can actually shine in their rights. How are you doing in your organization regarding this? What is your culture like in each of these areas? How far are you from creating that kind of culture that will be fully inclusive? Let's quickly go to Mentimeter again. Quickly, please just rate your organization. Not the global organization. Take your immediate environment that you are part of, where you really know not what's being said in your vision and values, but what's being lived. Yolande is taking over now the conversation around this.
I'm waiting because I want to see something come to 3. Anything. Anything. Okay, it doesn't look like it's going to happen today, so maybe we should move on, right? Good afternoon, everybody. Okay, so our results don't look that great, but I would like you to speak to the person next to you about those results. I liked seeing everybody waving. So for this round, after a minute is over, it would be really nice to see the entire room waving. So if you, as Alinda said, one eye to me, one eye to the person next to you. So just have a chat about what do these results mean to you as an individual. Chat to the person next to you, behind you, etc. And thereafter, we will talk to the panelists. You have a minute. More waves, more waves. Oh, you look so lovely. You can use both hands if you want as well. Lovely, thank you. Thanks very much. At this point, I'm going to ask our panelists to give us examples of where they have seen in their organizations or in your experiences, where intentional actions were taken to make the shift. In your organization, that would be one. But also to talk about any gaps that you see at the moment.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think I would like to talk about the positive aspects. I think from the South African Civil Aviation authority point of view, we're an organization where the leadership is 50% female and 50% male, and at the helm, Ms. Poppy Koza, a female CEO. And I think that has made us a more inclusive organization, where I find we have all of the aspects present, fairness, respect. I think we have the right touch points. And like Alinda was saying earlier, if you have the inclusivity, then all the factors on the triple bottom line will be right. So we're an entity that has had clean audit for 6 years, a top performing entity achieving 100%. We are open, we're transparent, and we have those robust engagements. If you look at policies, I mean, we've gone through extensive exercise to review policies, look at our leadership framework, look at our salary disparities, a 3-year project looking at aligning salaries, whether it's female or male. And I think we are now seeing the fruit from all of those initiatives coming through for us.
Lovely.
I'm from ATNS, and in terms of gender transformation, I think we are sitting at 47.35% of female, and the rest is males. But the picture as a whole, it can give you a very skewed result, because when you look at the core skills themselves, yes, that's where we still have to do. I think empowerment is something that we need to do. And those that have visited our exhibit booth, I think you would have seen a pamphlet that talks about Women Development Program. So as the company, we're now implementing the Women Development Program so that at least we can start changing the picture that we're seeing, because a lot of these numbers of females that you're seeing are mainly on the support function. Because if you can look at the engineering side, for example, we've got 21 females out of 100 males. While in the ATC side, it's about 284 females out of 650. So we still have a lot of work to do. But I'm proud to tell you that with the program that we're implementing on women development, I think it's starting to show some good results. Some of the ATCs that we've been seeing struggling as they started, we start to see them getting some courage, and now they are occupying some of the senior positions, and they've got good story to tell. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if, as Alinda said, that an inclusive culture is something that all organizations are after. It makes business sense, it makes sure that all our employees are engaged, they're much more productive. Why are we not able to have that inclusive culture? And there are a few reasons, right? There's discrimination, we know about that. There is prejudice, there are stereotypes, and there is bias that we're going to talk about. So those are all types of bias. So if you look at stereotypes, as you know, are just a generalized oversimplification of something about a group, right? Prejudice is when we make conclusions without having the necessary evidence to get there. Discrimination, we know about. So bias then, because those are all types of biases, has three essential elements. Firstly, it is an inclination or prejudice for or against one group of people. So here we're talking about gender, so that would be female, in a way that's considered to be unfair. And when it becomes prejudicial is when we make different decisions regardless of the compelling data that may be sitting in front of us. So our biases then prevent us from making the right decisions at the workplace. So why does it happen? It's easy to identify discrimination, right? You can identify discrimination, we can name it, everybody knows what it looks like. Brain researchers at the University of Virginia found that we take about 11 pieces of information per second. So all the things that are happening around us, but we can only process 40 of those. What happens to the rest then? We create shortcuts, right? Because we don't have enough time to process all of that. We create shortcuts and we rely on previous information. We rely on our previous experiences. So this happened the last time. This probably means that this is similar. That's our shortcut. So we don't process anything as much as we should. And we need to sometimes, right? If there's a car coming for you and you are crossing the road, you can't stand there and be thinking about what next to do. That is an automatic response that you're going to have. So this is then about having automatic responses at certain times. And we automatically connect the dots, right? So we don't think about, in the example that I've just given you, you're not going to think about, well, what speed is this car traveling at? What kind of car is it? You automatically know that you're in danger, get out of the way, and you run. Okay, so we automatically connect the dots. And in that instance, if you've seen this riddle before, please do not say anything. I would like you to work it out for yourself. Anyone have an answer? A correct answer. Okay, I'm not going to ask you to give the... Anybody want to volunteer the answer? Sir. Okay, you can just speak up, I'll repeat it. Okay. All right, so the answer is it's a son of somebody else and the father of somebody else. Okay? The correct answer is what? It's the mother. It's the mother. Why were we not able to go there? So whenever we've shown this riddle, You'll be amazed at the kinds of answers that we get. I mean, some will just blow your mind, that it is a step of somebody, you know, in the African context, these things happen this way or that way. It is amazing. The simple answer is that this is a woman. But we were not able to make that connection. We saw this, right? This comes from your industry earlier on this year. So when we talk about those automatic connections that we make and those biases that we have, I just want to turn to our panelists to talk a little bit about where do these biases come from socially, and I'm going to ask Fundi and Refilwe to talk to these ones. Fundi to talk about socialization, what happens at that level, and Refilwe to please talk about what we see in the media, what information is being fed to us. What is that 11 million bits that we get? Fundi.
Thanks, Yolande. So I guess from this perspective, I must say this was a very dark day in aviation when a statement was made like this. What was even darker for me was that a statement like this was left unchallenged. The industry did nothing about it, the organization did nothing about it, and quite honestly, even Anton, who was here earlier on, said, and that perturbed me. He said, and I'm sorry, I'm not picking on you, Anton, wherever you may be, but he said, it may not have been a nice thing to say. No, it was a very wrong thing to say. And so for me, it's the biases that continue, that we leave unchallenged, the status quo, to kind of brush statements like this under the carpet. We're not actively doing anything. We are not actively challenging. We're not asking him, oh, when he was asked to respond, by the way, he said kind of, yeah, maybe I will think about developing a female CEO. And for me, it's those biases that are so ingrained in each of us that this becomes the normal status quo. This becomes normal. And we collectively are not holding each other accountable. And until such time that we hold each other accountable, that we start to deliberately challenge the status quo and say, no, folks, that is not okay, then we're going to be perpetuating this very same bias and stereotype. And guess what? There will never be inclusivity. Never be inclusivity in the global sense of aviation if we just leave it unchallenged.
Thank you.
I think the media as well plays an important role in influencing opinion, interest, and behaviors. I mean, just taking a simple example, if you look at adverts or movies, and when they have to portray pilots, they're always portrayed as male pilots, or technicians, they always portray them as male technicians. And that stereotypic portrayal in the media, it affects the perception and, you know, girls' perception or women's perception that perhaps women can't, there's certain careers that can't do. And that was as well shown in that, you know, in your regular, where a woman was not expected to be a surgeon. Because when you look at advertisement, when you look at what's portrayed on social media, when you look at what's portrayed in the media, women are always portrayed on certain roles, you know, not on these skills like you know, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths. So I think the media has a bigger role to play in terms of changing that perception and perhaps putting women in role where girls can perhaps, you know, in those STEM roles where girls can perhaps aspire to, you know, to sort of assume those, you know, those roles. And, you know, to add on that, we've got a program where, you know, we go to schools and we always ask them, like in a classroom, we'll ask them, well, who's interested to become a pilot, an engineer? And more often than not, only men will raise their hands, not women. It's because what they see, you know, they become what they see. So if they cannot see certain careers portrayed in the media, they're not going to even think about following in those career footsteps.
Great. Thank you very much. So just in case we are thinking that only men are biased, right? Because we might be thinking that bias actually affects all of us. There is a study that is carrying on being done by Harvard University. Is anybody aware of this study? Just raise your hand if you are. The implicit, there is one person. Okay, so you can spread the message, please. The implicit association test basically measures our biases. So you can go onto their website and take the test for yourself. And the test is testing whether, it goes for gender, for careers, for all of these kind of things, to see how biased, you can go and test how biased you are as an individual. And if you think that you don't have any biases, I've got news for you. I've got news for you. So some of the studies that they have, some of the results that they have found is that people that have taken this test, and it's millions, right? People that have taken this test associate careers with males. So 76% of the people associate careers with males. For race, 70% have a preference towards white, 76% towards ability, and 70% towards people that don't look like me. So, we have all of these biases, and you can go and prove it for yourself if you don't believe me. We all have the biases. This levels the playing field completely. But there are two types of biases that we're going to talk about. Firstly, there is some bias that is conscious, where people, for example, at workplaces, we may say, no, she's too young to become a manager. That's conscious, right? Completely conscious, we all are aware of it. So those are the things that are above the surface that we can see, that we can name, that we can talk about. But there's also things that are just below the surface, which is what the implicit association test does. It's looking for those things that are below the surface, that we try to hide even from ourselves. But it's those things that are below the surface. So let's have a look at this video in that light.
You're about to meet Michael. He lives fast as a self-made millionaire.
You didn't have to dress up. It's all right.
You're going to photograph Michael. He's actually saved somebody's life. Michael is an ex-inmate. He's a commercial fisherman. Michael claims to be psychic.
Nice to meet you.
Michael's a former alcoholic. Here's your camera. I would like you to flesh out the essence of who he is.
What would you like out of this? What would you like the photograph to say about you?
Do you find that being a psychic impacts much on your day-to-day life?
I can see this is emotional for you.
Like to get to know the person.
You've only got 10 minutes, right?
I think you're a guy that's put yourself out there. You're not hiding anything. My plan was to find out about whoever it was and to try and get that. And what I learned from him is he's incredibly brave.
It was really intense. Pull this shirt out. Sorry.
I wanted to see the nature of the person, which then present a challenge. How do you portray him as a fisherman?
That's perfect.
He's a self-made millionaire and sort of a little bit intimidating. I wasn't going for a beautiful, nice, perfectly lit portrait.
I just want to try bring out something of who you are. I think that you just treat people like the everyday people, like everybody is.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, I hope I've got that guy's bravery on film.
So it was a very intimidating environment.
Can't see your work.
I like the empty chair next to it too.
Like, he's just a totally different person.
Yeah.
Almost looks like 6 different people. So not everything I told you today was true. I'm not a fisherman. I am not an alcoholic. The GFC hit me hard, but I've never been a millionaire. Never been in prison. I am a Bondi lifesaver, but the story we talked about never did happen. Not psychic. Can barely spell it.
Before I knew there were different characters in each of these, I thought, that's really strange. These don't look like portraits of the character I thought you were. You always got your own preconceptions and you've got your ideas.
It pushed me into a position and a space that I wouldn't normally be in.
You have to dig a lot deeper. It means you've got to be, I think, a lot more creative to work out how you're going to play things.
So sometimes what we see is not completely what we see, right? We're talking about connecting dots. So the different photographers connected their different dots, hence we had 6 different images. So there are a lot of these biases that we have. The universities that studied say there are over 150 types of biases that we have, or that have been identified so far. But luckily for you, I'm not going to take you through 150 biases today, because we would be here until tonight. They've been classified into about 5 different types. So if we look at the first one, it's confirmation bias. And confirmation bias is really looking for evidence to back up the opinion that you already have. So you're not looking for diversity, looking for input, you're just confirming a view that you already have. Halo and horns, where if an employee has done one good thing, for example, you believe that this employee will do good always. Or if an employee has done something that is not so great, that this employee is going to do not so great again. Expedience bias is about speed, trying to make decisions quickly, getting things done very quickly without involving yourself in the detail and understanding the arguments behind the decision that you're making. Affinity bias, and I think this is one of the dangerous ones when we look at workplaces. Affinity bias is where we like being around people who are like us, and that is natural. There's nothing we can do about that. All of us like being around people that are like us. But the problem with affinity bias is that it can create exclusion without us being aware of it. Because once we like people that look like us, that behave like us, it also means then that we give those people more resources, they have more access to more information, so they basically, it creates a situation of unfairness, but you are not aware of it. But that is a bias. So it is always, especially at the workplace, to be aware of our affinity bias. Who do you hang out with? Who are you talking to all the time? Who do you go to for problem solving? For men, since we are at a gender summit, is that always a man that you go to? So affinity bias is something that is very important. Internal bias, performance bias, is a bias where we talk about whether, we will say some people are lucky. She didn't get there because she worked hard. She's just lucky, but the man worked hard. He worked really hard on the project, and he deserves all these accolades that he's doing. She's lucky, so that is, I see a lot of nods for that one. So men are agreeing that that is what happens. Okay, so person next to you or behind you, where in your works, I should have said, so if you look at all of those biases that we've talked about, that's an easy way for you to remember it, right? Cheap. Confirmation bias, halo and horns, expedience bias, affinity bias, and performance bias. So where in your environment have you personally experienced bias? That cheap bias, whether it's confirmation bias, whether it's halo or horns, etc. Okay, you've got a minute to talk to the person next to you. I'm waving. Lovely, thank you very much. I'm now going to ask, okay, there's somebody who's almost falling off her chair there. She's waving so hard. It's Linda in front. Okay, I'm now going to ask the panelists to just talk to us about 2 or 3 most common examples that you've seen. And I'm going to ask all of you, Tendani, Refilwe, everybody. Okay, do you want to start, Tendani?
Yeah, thank you. I would like to give an example of our female air traffic controllers. As we all know that they need to be medically fit and for them to maintain their licenses. But as a female, you at some point get pregnant and have to take a maternity leave. And it's like during that period when you are pregnant or when you are to take leave, you are somehow at disadvantage because the peers that you have started with, they will be progressing. You will be busy doing other things because at some point, I think when you're pregnant, you are being perceived as if you're not medically that fit and you end up doing a kind of administrative jobs while your male peers are progressing with what they're supposed to do and they are going back for training. You come back from maternity, you have lost a lot of time and you can't even catch up. So you're always behind, and that also then creates some kind of disparities even with salaries because you can never earn the same salary as the salary of your male counterpart that you have started with at the same time because they would have progressed.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think I'll take halos and horns. I think this type of bias, I think you might see quite often, and I think I've seen it in an interview scenario recruitment. I think it happens there. You interview candidates, you look at the profile, and you look at who's in front of you, and if they make a negative statement, it can turn you against the person, and in that way impact your judgment. So I think it's an area where you will see it quite often. So I can also touch on affinity bias while I'm there. I think I can be guilty of that. I think I like to associate with people that have the same interests, same likes, and I think it comes to us naturally. And you tend to cling, and also you believe that person stands for the values and the ideals, and they're moving up in the ranks. That's where I want to be associated. So I think it happens often, the affinity bias as well.
Great, thank you. Fundi?
I think mine is performance bias. And I love the acronym when you read out CHEAP, because the effect of what I'm about to say was that it was a cheap shot. So I've been in this position for just under a year. A couple of months ago, I get questions from a journalist from a pretty big publication. And it was never about linking it to performance, my hard work, what I've done, whether I'm in an enabling environment that I applied to become a COO and I got the position. That was almost secondary. But the first question that was asked of me twice was, we understand you got this position because you were sleeping with A, B, C, D, right? Gasp, but folks, it still happens. It still happens. And that's why I said it was actually nothing less than cheap. Right? I'm also a Soweto girl, so I was about to go burn the building down, but I had to take a couple of steps back and to say, that is the bias, that is the performance bias. So people have not objectively looked at the situation. People have not objectively looked at my criteria, my stripes that I've earned within the industry, my knowledge, etc. But because they wanted to portray a certain picture of lack of performance in the boardroom, but performance somewhere else, Therefore, on that basis, there was a promotion, and I actually penned it down in that email. I said, sir, you are going to rue the day you asked me question 7. I still remember it, question 7, because it cannot be in this day and age, in 2018, with experience, with the amount of phenomenal women that we've got in aviation, and what we still need to do, that your automatic question or your automatic stance is that the woman is sleeping with the man. And incidentally, I then said, the previous COO was a man. Did you ever actually pen down that question to the man to say, did he sleep with another man, for example, to get that promotion? Because it's unheard of. But because it's a woman, must be the default point.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think in my area, I've seen all of those biases that you guys mentioned. I mean, I can speak about affinity bias, where it does impact a lot on recruitment, especially in the operational side of the aviation industry. I've been in selections where you sit in there, they're like, oh, no, we know this person, we're in blah, 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 just for an example, the Air Force together, or the whatever, and that can be determined whether you actually get a job or not. And about 2 weeks ago as well, I was sitting on, I'm a flight instructor as well, and we're sitting on selection looking for other flight instructors, part-time flight instructors. And I mean, what was happening is exactly what you're explaining in terms of the affinity bias, where people were coming in and this guy was busy saying, oh, I know this guy from somewhere else, I know this person from somewhere else. And you could see even during the interview that they're leaning more towards those guys that they know and could identify with, or that have gone to a certain sort of flight school. So we see that quite a lot. Performance bias, I don't even have to go that. I don't know how many times I've been told, I'm getting further because I'm connected to somebody, or they don't even look at your own achievements or performance. So in the aviation industry, especially in the operational side, that is very, very much, it's prominent, even as a pilot, as highly technical, where you have to take 8, 9 exams to get through your license, you still get that. So that actually surprises me as well, because the CAA exams, there's nowhere where it's written male or female, or where it's written you're connected, or you're political, you're not. Everybody writes the same exam, but you still get that. You have your confirmation bias as well. It happens a lot in the aviation industry, when they've made a judgment about you, and it's gonna stick. But the sad part is, even if you try, I've seen it with my students and even if you try to prove them wrong, that this is perhaps wrong, they will create an environment that they will make sure to confirm, to make sure that those biases that they've created sticks, kind of thing, or to say, no, see, we were right about this person doing this and that. So we've seen pretty much, all of them in the industry.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Recruitment and selection comes up quite a lot when we talk about biases. So are there any human resource practitioners in the room? There are some? No, raise your hands. I'm not gonna accuse you of anything. I might. Okay. So recruitment and selection comes up quite a lot in terms of biases, because this is where we decide who comes in, right? This is the point where we decide who comes into the organization. So human resource practitioners and leaders have a very huge role to play in this area, but it is fraught with bias, I think, as our panelists have said already. So to take an example of that, this is a study that was done at recruitment and selection. It was HR practitioners and leaders, I believe. And the same CV, the only thing that was changed on the CV was the name of the person. When it was a woman, only 49% of the people said, we believe that this is the right candidate for us. Change the name to a man, the number goes up. Why is that? Same CV, same qualifications, same experience. Okay? So it is about some automatic response that we have towards men being the people that are better able, perhaps. So recruitment and selection is a huge area that we need to focus on, and we will talk a little bit about it in a second. Anyone aware of this study of the US orchestra that was trying to increase the number of females? Somebody, there are 3 people aware of it. So what happened in this study is the orchestra just didn't have enough females. And they were trying to increase the number of females in the orchestra, but females were just not making it. audition after audition after audition, the females were not making it. Introduce blind auditions, what happens? The number of women in the orchestra increases by 25%. When people are not able to see the women actually playing, but just listen to the music and listen to how well the person is playing, the number increases. The men in front are laughing. There are two men in front that are laughing. And I'm taking it that maybe they feel guilty about something. But I will talk to you after this session. I've identified both of you gentlemen. I am looking at you. I've gotten your name, Mr. Atherman. So recruitment and selection then is one of the areas. We've already seen that even from the stage of receiving a CV, there is potential bias. You go into a room and interview, the kinds of things that Refilwe was talking about happen in the room, or even Nivashni spoke about. A person says one thing in the interview, we make conclusions about the rest. They've said one thing that you probably didn't agree with or didn't like, it means they're a bad candidate. So there's a lot of room in the recruitment and selection area, and Google has done a lot of work in this area. Because, you know, they are data people, right? So we all believe that if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So Google measures everything. In fact, they've got a director of people analytics. So this is what they analyze. So they looked at this area of recruitment and selection, trying to understand where are their biases. And what they concluded, which is very good advice for everybody else, is that at this stage, look at what is only important in the role. Discard everything else. You do not need the name of the person necessarily. I know I'm taking you people to an area that you're probably not going to be comfortable with, but you don't need a name of the person on the CV. Do you agree? What does the name tell you? Nothing, right? So you don't need a name of the person on the CV. You don't need to know where they went to school. You need to know that they've got the qualification, right? So in South Africa, I can't speak about other countries, but in South Africa, if we know you went to UCT versus somebody who went to Fort Hare, well, which one are you going to lean towards? And I'm sure this happens as well in other countries. There are universities that are known to be rated to be higher than other universities, therefore we lean towards those people. So at recruitment and selection, it is important, you as leaders of functions, to define exactly what it is that you're looking for. If you're looking for somebody who manages projects, who is a great problem solver, all of these things, this is what you interview against. It's clearly defined and you interview against that and you will be much more objective in your decision making. We also know, though, that women, I'm talking to the women in the room now, we tend not to apply for certain roles, right? So even if we know we are almost there, women will say, oh, but you know, I don't quite have that experience. No, I'm not going to apply. What does a man do who has less than what you have? He applies. He is going to apply, and there's research to support this, men. Please do not attack me. There is research to support this. Females, we doubt ourselves. We do not want to take that chance, but men will do so. Even if they don't, they've got nothing to lose. So they will take the opportunity. Taken further, by the way, I'm digressing a little bit, but females, we also don't negotiate our salaries. So the salary disparity continues even more because we don't negotiate. I was telling a friend of mine, actually, the organization that I worked for, I don't ever remember ever negotiating my salary. It was, that's your increase, okay. That's your pay, okay. But men were probably doing something completely different from me. So just be aware. So if you've got employees that are reporting to you, sitting in this room today, good luck to you, boss, on next week. And you can name, you say, that woman said, we don't negotiate, I'm here to negotiate. Okay, so the other parts where we influence as leaders is in learning and development. Who are the people that we choose for opportunities to go to that management development program at Harvard? Who are those people? Have you looked at who those people are? And if it's Affinity bias, it's probably a similar group of people that are going to get these opportunities. If you're a man and your affinity is towards other men of the same color, that's exactly what's going to happen as well. Job opportunities, the same. I think we've spoken about that. Promotion, because these are the people that you would have developed, these are the people you would have given more resources to, and so the cycle continues. So it starts from recruitment through the life cycle of an employee, up to reward and recognition, as we've just spoken. Okay, so let's do Mentimeter once again, and we're asking the question, to what extent is bias against women evident in these areas in your organization? I assure you there is no voter rigging in this particular voting session, so feel free. Your vote will be counted. Okay, I'll give you a minute more, and Alinda will take over for the next section.
Well, if we look at that, still a long way to go for us. So, what now? We said inclusion and creating an inclusive culture is a journey. Where does this leave us now? I'd like to do a small demonstration. I know this is difficult for you to see, so I'm going to ask the cameraman to really focus on what I'm doing, and Yolande, if you can come and help me. Please watch what is happening here. Open the hole that you can see. Yeah. Food coloring. Tiny, tiny, tiny drop of red food coloring goes in there.
It was not so tiny, I agree.
Well, semantics. Just to make sure it happens in the shortest space of time, you know, I want to optimize time. Good. What is happening here? 1, 2, 3, 4, doesn't matter, it's technical detail, drops of red. Colors the entire glass. So if we say, so what? What now? What do we do about the situation? We are the change. You as leaders are the change that is needed in your environment. It needs to happen. You need to lead it. There's a lovely story about Gandhi. I don't know if it's true or not. Many of these stories are not true, but it still reflects something very powerful. Gandhi once went to visit a tiny village. And in this village, there was a woman, like most mothers, really being loving her son and being concerned about her son, because her son was gaining too much weight. 8 years old, already becoming really chubby, and the children were sort of joking with him, and they didn't want to play with him anymore because he was becoming very fat. And the mother was really worried about her son. And she spoke to him and she said, whatever his name is, you shouldn't eat so much sweet stuff. And he would laugh at her mum, and he would just continue his way. And then she heard that Gandhi is coming to this village. And she thought, he doesn't listen to me, I'm just his mother, but he will listen to Gandhi. So she took him by the hand, and she took him to where she knew Gandhi would be passing. And she waited and waited, and at the right moment she saw him, and she said, please, can I speak to you? And he said, yes, ma'am. She said, can you please speak to my son? He's eating so much sugar and sweet stuff. Gandhi listened at her, looked at the boy, kept silent for a little bit, and then he said, okay, ma'am, I'll speak to your son, but not now. Next month, I'll be coming exactly the same road again. Bring him back to me then, and I will speak to him. And the mother was ecstatic. She was so excited because she would now have the opportunity for her little chubby boy to be now talking to Gandhi himself, and Gandhi will help him with this problem. And the whole month she was waiting, and she thought, yeah, eat that little sugar. You won't be doing that for much longer. And as Gandhi came to the village again, she again took her son. And when he came past, she said, can you remember me? I'm the woman. He said, yes, I know. And he turned to the boy and he said, son, you must stop eating so much sugar. And he turned away and he walked away. And the mother was a little bit shocked. She said, went behind and said, sorry, is there nothing more you want to say? Is that all? He said, yes, ma'am. Boy, you must not eat so much sugar. And she said, but surely if this is all, then you could have told him last month. Gandhi looked at her and looked at the boy and he said, no, ma'am. Last month I could not tell your son to stop eating sugar because last month I was eating too much sugar. We so easily talk about inclusion. We so easily talk about being inclusive. We so easily talk about embracing diversity and equality. But what do we live? What do we say as leaders? What is the impression that we create? Are we prepared to challenge and stand up and have the courage to say, this is not fair, this is not right? Or do we just keep on eating sugar and expecting the organization to stop eating sugar? Culture will not change if we as leaders do not change the way we are and what we say and what we keep silent about and what we recognize and what we reward. So what now? How do we handle, how do we as leaders in our industry, in our organizations, how do we then deal with equality? How do we create inclusion? It starts with us. Us stop eating sugar. And we call it arm yourself, A-R-M. If you want to create an environment where your work environment organization is inclusive, you have to arm yourself with 3 things. The first one is accept that you are biased. I had quite a long argument. She's our specialist in bias, and I had quite a long argument with her right in the beginning when she spoke to me. She said, I'm not biased about this or that or that. And she said, Alinda, you are. You have to face it, you are. We are all biased. It doesn't depend on whether you are intelligent or not. It doesn't depend on your education. It doesn't depend on your job level. You are biased. And we have to accept that. Let me just give you a little bit of a test and see. I won't test how biased you are. That's her job. But just to see how awake you are. Okay. There is a little sentence about a worm, a fat worm. It has nothing to do with bias, but there's some learning in it. How many numbers can you find hidden in that paragraph? A number would be, 1 would be O-N-E would be 1. T-W-O would be 2. So look at the numbers, words. Just do that by yourself and see how many numbers can you find. If you need help, ask the person next to you and see how many you can come up with. Do it in pairs, then you can put your ideas together. Okay. Who see, just show me hands, who have identified one number? Okay, just, we'll get there, 2, 3, 4, 5, he can't wait. Is that Mr. Abraham?
I'm speaking to him afterwards.
Okay, okay, 5. There's more than that. Look a little bit closer. Look a little bit closer. Who can find 6? Who can find 7? Who can find 8? Let me show you where they are. Who found that one? Easy. Okay. 1. What's the next one? Great, 11. Next one? 5. Next one? 7. 3. 10. Great. Let me at this stage teach you the inclusive clap. What you've now did is you've applauded. Let me teach you the inclusive clap. So only no different voices with one voice, one clap. So just do. Much better, please. Just together. Again. Okay, got it. Okay, great. So those of you like Mr. Abraham who got 5, well done. But there were many, many more. When I showed you that, could you imagine that there were actually 8 numbers hidden there? No, I was shocked when I saw that. I thought 1 or 2 or 3. Now, how does that link to bias and unconscious bias? When we look at ourselves, we don't see it. It's there, but we don't see it. We see it in other people very easily, immediately. But we are not biased. We don't have bias, but they do. So in the same way that we have seen here that it's there, even if we're not aware of it, we have to accept that we are biased. We all have that. So we are biased. All people have that. It's not about being good or bad leader, or not even about your intentions. It's about those networks in your brain, those neuron pathways that's been cemented since you were really tiny. And they say that a path is being made by often walking on it. So through our experience, the way we've been brought up, our education, the media, our experience in the workplace, that road has been trampled. And that's the road that our thinking goes automatically. Automatically jump to conclusions, automatically connect the dots. So we have to accept that. It's not, so we de-demonize it. Is there something like that? You de-demonize it. Yes, it is now. So you de-demonize bias and say, it's normal, it's natural. All people have it. All systems are biased. And neither people nor systems are aware of their bias. Because it's unconscious. We don't know about it. We're not aware of it, and that is why it's so important to have conversations and get feedback from others in terms of how we view things and what we do, and create that openness amongst leaders to be able to say, what did you say just now? And what could this mean? And how did it come across? And what does it tell me as a woman? So firstly, you arm yourself by accepting that you are biased, and that's part of who you are. Then you arm yourself by recognizing, taking the unconscious and making it conscious. This is a very commonly used model for the 4 states of competence. You can use it in any area. Let's use it. Who of you know it? 4 quadrants? Okay. On the one hand, we've got competence. How competent are you at something? From low in competence to high in competence. On the other hand, we have consciousness. Low in consciousness, you're not even aware. And high in consciousness mean absolutely full focus on it. So when we enter any new skill, we are actually, before we enter it, we're actually unconscious incompetent. For instance, when you are a tiny child, very few tiny children will sit and think, how do I drive a car? Where do I put my feet? You actually, it's not even part of your world. You just get in your car and your parents drive you where you want to be. You're unconscious and you're incompetent in that area. And then you turn 16 or 17 or 18, I can't even remember, it's long ago. And then you get behind the steering wheel, and then you become consciously incompetent. Because there's a gear lever, there's a steering wheel, there's a petrol pedal, there's a brake, and there's, there's a 4th thing, the stick, or, you know, there's a lot of things that you have to manage at the same time. Okay. And I think all of you will still remember that first time when you drove with your foot slowly going up and down, slowly, no, slower, they say slowly, and then you have to let go of this and you have to grip this. It was terrible. And you thought, how do people drive? How on earth do people manage to pull all of this together? You're consciously incompetent. You're so aware of the fact that you are struggling, you can't get it right. But when last have you driven like that? Then we become consciously competent. We actually say that this is actually doing fine. I may still struggle a little bit when I'm going uphill, etc., but I'm actually getting it right. But you still have to focus. First do that, then that, and that. But you are focusing and it's working. When you get in your car now, what happens? Are you still thinking petrol first, gear first, this? No. You have become unconscious competent. It becomes part of who you are. Driving is now who you are. You do it, sometimes you drive home, and you have never even thought of driving. You get home, you think, goodness me, I never even focused. I didn't realize I was driving. It becomes part of who you are. Now, does this apply to unconscious bias? We all start with a space that we say we're not conscious of our biases. And that is a scary place to be in the workplace. Because if you go back to the hippopotamus, if you're not aware that there's a big hippopotamus below the surface and you go over with your boat, this hippopotamus may overturn your boat. And there could even be a loss of life. So in the workplace, it's very, very scary and it has a very high risk to leave bias unrecognized, because it can cause severe harm. Refilwe talked about how she felt excluded. It can harm people emotionally if they're excluded and discriminated against. It can harm their opportunities, it can harm their growth, it can harm their careers, and it actually keeps the organization from utilizing the potential that they're actually paying for. So, we need to surface it. We need to become aware of those things. We are making connections between dots that are actually in our mind and not in what we see. And we have a huge role in, as leaders, confronting each other, helping each other become aware of that. So, unconscious incompetent, starting to become conscious competent and say, but wow, I've done it again. I've now again put a halo on this woman's or man's head. I've again looked at this applicant and I just saw a horn. So becoming conscious about that and becoming really grateful and glad that you are uncovering something that has been hidden. Then, when you keep practicing that, when you keep asking yourself questions, when you keep inviting feedback, you become consciously competent. Consciously competent to handle those biases that used to be hidden that are now on the table. You create a common language in the organization where we can all talk about it. And that's important because there are two levels of thinking. And the one is that first level of thinking. When I put my hand on the stove, I immediately pull it back because I have been burnt. As Yolande say, the same if you go over a road and the car comes. You don't have to analyze it. On a gut level, you respond. That's the way you've been wired, biologically wired to respond. First level thinking comes from the gut. It's not a good place for a manager and a leader to make decisions from, but we do it. So we need to take the first level thinking and we need to lift our thinking to a higher level where things become deliberate. We think about it, we become more rational and more thoughtful. Who is sitting in front of us? What is that person bringing? This is my initial instinctive response, but is that valid? Could there be another way of thinking of it? We talk about the mental handbrake. The gut is designed to help you move fast. And moving fast is not the place on which a leader should be making decisions. So we need the mental handbrake. We need to slow down our thinking. Whenever we're in a position that we have to make fast decisions about people, we say, guys, girls, slow down. We are in a position here where we can make mistakes, where our biases will not be challenged, where our unconscious thinking do not have time to surface. Little things like, for me, there are two things that I learned, little skills that I found very valuable. The one is who says. Who says? If I decide, for instance, somebody is the right person for a promotion, then I ask myself, who says? Or I will ask in our manco, who says? And we start to debate, who says it? In whose opinion is that perspective valid? Are there other perspectives that need to be put on the table? Something like, how come you bring somebody into the C-suite, you say, we need that man there because he's got a lot to contribute. Then you ask yourself, how comes? How come that he has so much to contribute? Because he's had all the opportunities sitting around those tables. So how can we then help somebody else to get that opportunity? Using the mental handbrake to make sure that we do not go into gut automatic mode where biases can actually steer us. The other day I heard a lovely metaphor about bias. It said we don't see it, but it's like unseen currents below the ocean that actually takes the boat in a direction it may not want to go. Let's use that mental handbrake to make sure that the boat is not going in a direction that will break down inclusiveness. Yolande?
Thanks, Alinda. Is everyone still awake? I can't hear? No? Lovely, thank you for being awake. Okay, so Alinda has talked about arming yourself then, but there's some specific things that you can do as a leader or a person in human resources. And the first thing is just to be curious. And this goes for anything where we define it as something different from us. Just to be curious and ask questions about what could be going on here. So, what do we do then? So we now accept that we are biased. Do we accept in this room? Oh, we need to do some more convincing. We're going to make you sit through this again. Do you accept that you are biased? Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so you don't want to sit through this again, do you? We've accepted all of that, but there are other things that we can do. We need to relate deeper and wider. And what that means is go to areas that you may not be comfortable with, areas that you have not explored, talking to people that don't look like you, that don't behave like you, that don't go to places that you go to. You're relating to people who are different from you. That builds your skill in terms of getting that confidence to relate to people who are different from you. And you might learn something and find out some information that you didn't know. We've talked about getting out of your comfort zone. It is not easy to go to a group of people that look very different from you, and you know already that you stand out, right? It's not easy, but you do need to get into that area. Evaluate subtle messages. Okay, so what are some of the messages that we sometimes say? So I'm a human resources practitioner, guilty of all the biases that we've spoken about as well. And I remember one interview where we had a number of candidates that participated. And this particular woman was very, very strong. But the panelists did not like this woman. So being a very good HR practitioner, I'm just saying, I then said, but why is she not the right candidate? She meets this, she meets that, she meets that. And the reason that the panelists agreed on was that she wouldn't be able to communicate to senior managers. So I thought, this is strange. This woman speaks English. We could understand her during this session. And what came out was that her accent was different. It was just about accent. So those subtle messages that we're sending out to people, accent is another area. We could go on and on about bias. I think we're running close to our time. The program director has just indicated to me, so I'm going to move a little bit faster. So hold yourself and others accountable. And we've talked about this already. Call out bias where you see bias and ask other people to do the same. In relating wider and deeper, it is difficult. But if you find something that you may have in common with that person from that other group, it becomes easier. So if it's somebody who has kids, that's something to relate to if you yourself have a child, if they go to the same school. So it is possible to find things that can bring you much closer to people that are different from you. And that also will help you with your affinity bias. Pay attention to micro-messages. And micro-messages are those small messages that we sometimes send out, that we receive many times a day. So they're small, apparently, things that we may not be aware of. We congratulate certain people, well done. You keep saying the same things to other people, but we don't do the same things for other people. So small gestures or actions that over time make you feel bad as an employee. You know, it's small things that are being said to you. So examples of micro inequities are those. Okay. Alinda has already spoken to this. Did I go backwards? No, I didn't go backwards. Okay, Alinda has already spoken to that. But what we are saying, at least this is our approach from Free to Grow, is that for a culture to be inclusive, you cannot only talk to individuals. The organization as a whole needs to make a shift. So today is just being about self-aware as a person, but this needs to be taken to teams. Teams must be aware of this. The organization must be aware of all of these things, and then the culture will become inclusive. We have one more. Shall I show the video? Okay. Stefani, we'll be closing in a second. Just have a video. So in closing, I would like you to just write down one takeaway that you have from this session, and hopefully something that you are going to change in your life, in your environment. Just take that time. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank our panelists for spending the time with us, and thank you for being such a great audience. And I hope you have taken something away from this session. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much to this panel of power women for their insights. And what I really enjoyed was some of the really honest reflections that each of you shared with us, but also the honesty in which we had to face ourselves in the room, right? and prejudices and bias, and understanding those, and how important it is for each of us to look into our own story to build a new narrative around diversity, inclusivity, and what it truly means to be transformational leaders in our organizations. Ladies, at this point in the program, you have got a tea break on your program. I would like us to take a stretch break. This is what I call the graveyard shift of the program. We're a little bit tired. We've had a really long, engaging, highly technical and content-filled day, but we've still got a panel to go, and of course, a welcome cocktail a little bit later on. But I've made things a little bit easier for you. So I'd like us to take a stretch break. Those of you who need to take a quick comfort break may. Tea and coffee has been laid out outside. But I would like everybody back in their seats in the next 5 to 8 minutes so that in 10 minutes we can commence with the very next and our last panel of the day, which will begin to look at the development goals and agenda around gender inclusivity in the aviation sector. Our cocktail this evening has also been moved up. So what we will do is that when we finish with the last panel of the day, I'm going to give you a few snippets and insights in terms of what our program contains tomorrow, so that you all have a good idea of what's up next on our agenda. And then from there, we will immediately move into the welcome cocktail for this evening, kindly sponsored by our friends at ATNS. So that will mean that you don't necessarily have to leave the ICC and then come back a little bit later on. We are, at this point in time, pretty much ready to receive you a little bit earlier than anticipated already. We want these conversations to continue. I know today has been very content-filled, and a few of you have come to me and asked us, at what point do we get to engage and network and talk about some of the issues that are being raised? But definitely we will make the requisite space for that, particularly tomorrow and into Friday. But please use the social breaks to also get a lot of that out. Many of our speakers have traveled long distances and are here. Our panel guests are also still here, so it's also great to see them too. And of course, if there's any burning issues, you're welcome to contact me on the app, and I'll make sure that we weave them into the narrative of what we are building here together. So, our 5 to 8 minute stretch break starts now, and then we will delve into the final panel of the day back in the room. I also ask you, if you may, where you are seated now for this exercise, please come back and sit in the same place. Thank you very much. Thank you.